a Boston conservative in the cradle of liberty. You'll want to listen when Chuck Morse speaks on the Information Radio Network.
And good afternoon, it is I hosting Chuck Morse Speaks, yours truly, Chuck Morse, Monday through Friday, 10 till noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 to 11 Central Time. You're welcome to join the program here at the Information Radio Network, 1-800-773-8255, 1-800-773-8255. We're awaiting the arrival of our guest this hour, that being Walter Brooks. Walter Brooks has quite a story to tell, and it's a story that actually makes me nervous, and I think we'll we'll get a pretty good sense of why. That is, if we're able to reach him. And under the circumstances, I'm not sure we will be able to reach him, given the nature of his story here. But I felt that, as Fred Friendly said to Edward R. Murrow, if the fear is in this room, then let's do it. Of course, he was making reference to a false fear on his part, which was that he was afraid to air a special on Senator Joseph McCarthy back in the 1950s because he might be accused of being a communist. And I think it's safe to say that McCarthy did go overboard in using that sort of congressional power to make such innuendos against his enemies. Of course, that's nothing compared to what's going on now. But nevertheless, his sentiments were quite right. If he, as a figure in the media, felt afraid to report on something that was a reasonable and objective story, in this case, footage of Senator McCarthy in Congress, because he could be personally hurt and attacked, then that is the time to step up and act like a patriot and do his job. And he did, and of course it destroyed McCarthy, which, was good and bad, I suppose. But, when I look at an email here from Walter Brooks in response to my promotion for one of my books, and with a story here, and suggesting maybe that he could come on my show, it brings up that same dynamic. If the fear is in this room, then let's do it.
Well, I would be all for that.
Is this Walter?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Walter, for joining me. I'm going to briefly read, if you don't mind, the email that you sent me. You say here you did World News Review for 8 years or so. The result was that your mail was seized, your post office box was shut down, your telephone was made dead through people who called you. They got a ringing. Your credit accounts were closed, payments demanded in full even though you were current in payments. Your employer's computer lost records of your employment, and your paychecks ceased to be issued. The state of Florida lost a record of you having a driver's license. You were run off the road by a police car, and the police produced 2 witnesses to a crime that turned out never to have occurred. Your bank account returned deposits you'd made during the previous 3 months. What's going on here, Walter?
Well, at that time, I had first been asked to do world news as a review of known events. But I was facing a lag in time between when I might see an item, when I might write it up and send it in, and when it might be reported thereafter. And I thought that kind of a review might be boring. So what I tried to do was to look for items. I received about 150 publications from all over the world. So I looked for items that related to what was being focused on by major U.S. media, but which had not yet seen light of day. Okay? And I thought that I would just add to the picture And everything that I was producing was published information. It just hadn't been seen by people in this country. Okay? And so I believe that I was doing nothing wrong. I believe that I was acting as a journalist because I was supplying my feature to newspapers and radios as well as to private subscribers. And I think that I kept finding items that were disfavored. And what I mean by that is it took me a while to begin to understand, primarily because of the things that happened to me, that these items might have been known and suppressed. So where I was thinking that I was finding new information and supplying it, perhaps what I was doing was finding things that people didn't want seen. Now, I believe I was aligning with Thomas Jefferson, okay? And that people in a democracy who vote need to be aware so that they can vote in the way they might want to vote without being, say, misled, or I just wanted to give them more of a total picture, okay?
Sure,
and
sure.
Everything I was reporting was factual. Okay?
Now, let me just ask a few questions here, Walter. First of all, what you were doing then is you were taking articles that had been published primarily in European publications, and oftentimes Europe gets information quicker than we do, about the United States, that is.
I was also reviewing Soviet, Eastern European, Chinese, India, Israel, Arab, Filipino, you name it.
All right, so you were looking at foreign information, probably by web, and just reading it, and then you were passing it on to American media outlets and asking them if they knew about it, if they'd report on it.
Well,
you weren't actually...
It was a weekly news feature called World Press Watch. I appeared, for instance, on the editorial page every Sunday with Jack Anderson, which I thought truly was an honor, commendable.
I'd say, yeah, great investigative reporter.
Yeah, it was a feature.
Okay. So then you were published as a syndicated columnist.
Correct.
Okay.
So I was independent.
I understand. So you weren't part of the syndicators group. You simply were in a sense, you were providing media content. You were providing coverage. Now, Walter, do you have any idea? Do you have any idea what article in particular might have got you in trouble?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's have it.
All right. I had Iran-Contra.
Iran-Contra?
I had Iran-Contra. I had been a proponent. I'm the author of what became known as liberation theology. Okay?
You're talking here about in the Catholic Church, this was a kind of a socialistic movement in Central America.
Not exactly. Okay. I used Machiavellian politics, power politics. Okay? I used the logic of power politics to promote individual human rights. Okay? All right.
I just want to separate here. You're not talking about the particular what's called liberation theology in the Catholic Church. That's a whole separate topic. Okay, I get that.
All right. So at any rate, I had shared an office with Senator Murphy, and he was passing my stuff to Reagan. And the gist of it was that the U.S., up until Reagan, had supported military governments. The Soviet Union had supported liberation movements or rebels. Okay?
Right. Okay.
And I suggested that the strongest force on the planet was people's individual desire to be free in democracy. And so it was my logic that helped to sway Reagan and to get him for the first time to have the U.S. support rebel movements. Okay?
Well, what's controversial about that? I mean, that seems like Reagan was referred to the freedom fighters, and he was supporting people who are fighting against the communists in Nicaragua. I mean, that was public policy. What's wrong with that?
What became wrong with it was two aspects, okay? Congressional funding was withheld.
Sure, the Boland Amendment.
So in order to finance liberation movements, our intelligence agencies sought to find ways with their discretionary budget, okay, which is legal, to raise monies to support
to help fund the Contras, right? I remember it
became arms for drugs, but then the arms were being sold to Iran.
Exactly. Okay? That's why they call it the Iran-Contra.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, in Central America, we were supplying, I guess it essentially became arms for drugs. And the drugs, we set up networks to sell. Okay? So, and that actually led to Clinton. At any rate, I started getting reports out of Syria and Costa Rica about arms shipments that were going out of, ending up in Iran. So I would report what was already reported. And I'm only mentioning this as the answer to your question as to if there was any one particular focus that was getting me into a great deal of trouble.
Well, Walter, let me interrupt you for a second here. That's a huge one. And I could tell you that I happened to interview the late former Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger before he died, and on this program. And he told me that he was hounded until all the way through the Bush administration, right up till Clinton became president, when everything suddenly stopped. But he was personally hounded by investigations and harassments for all those years over this issue, and they found nothing on him.
Yeah, I don't think he was involved.
No, he wasn't.
Reagan was involved. I think Reagan accepted responsibility as president.
Right.
Okay.
No, I mean I don't think he was either. And that's his point. He said he was hounded by all of these people that he wasn't even sure who was behind it, but
correct,
investigated and harassed right up to the end of his life. All right, we'll be right back. Walter Brooks is my guest.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thank you very much. And my guest is Walter Brooks. He's a journalist. He's provided information to media, and he's been prosecuted for doing it. Walter, what's going on now?
Say persecuted rather than
I would say persecuted, yes. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Walter, what happened after Iran-Contra? Did they have you been able to get back into your work as a public advocate?
No. But adversity has still continued. I thought that I made a detente at one point by ceasing publication, okay? Where I wouldn't bother them and they won't bother me, all right? The way I phrased it when I suspended publication was I said I was caught between public apathy and government concern. Okay?
Interesting. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, basically, in a sense, a lot of times when you reveal troubling things, the public doesn't want to believe it because it's so outside of the kind of the conventional way of thinking that people can't get their mind around it. They reject it. I can speak to this. When I ran for Congress in Massachusetts against Barney Frank in 2004, I discovered that Frank had authored and gotten through Congress an amendment to the Immigration Act that made it possible for potential terrorists to get legal visas. He felt it was discriminating to stop it. In fact, Bill Clinton's CIA director Woolsey mentioned it in the Wall Street Journal. He said Congress had made it possible for terrorists to come into the United States with legal visas. And when I brought this up, and by the way, the 9/11 terrorists had legal visas when they blew up the World Trade Center. Yeah, the government's hands were tied. And when I brought it up during the campaign, people, they agreed with me. Nobody disputed my facts, but they just didn't want to hear it. They said, we don't care. We love Barney Frank. And it just...
or you made them uncomfortable.
Well, that's just it. It's like when something is
the reality intrudes upon the cherished ideal. All right?
Well, people have a narrative that's very heavily influenced by our establishment media, which knows how to manipulate emotions. It knows how to crowd out unpleasant news in many cases, and in other times have people publicly denounced for very minor things.
They present
and the
the picture.
That's right, and the result is that you have this sort of cult-like, development. I mean, Barney Frank had a cult following in Massachusetts. He was lionized by the press as this great and glorious figure, and people just don't want to believe that something like this can be true. It's sort of what Adolf Hitler talked about when he echoed Lenin.
Why they vote for him.
Well, it's the big lie theory. I mean, people can, they're aroused by small lies, but when you have a lie that's so big and so massive, people just don't want to believe it. They suspend credulity. They just they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of paradoxes in life. It used to be called, going way back somewhat in Eisenhower's time, the shadow, okay, is that there's an image which could be true of a public figure, okay, and is the reason that public figure is admired or liked, okay, and it is the main thing. But then in that shadow, there's all kinds of things going on, okay? Sometimes with or without the knowledge of that public figure, okay? And, one of the great ironies in my view is Carter. He is a benign, harmless, beneficent Christian figure, all right? But his shadow was to create Al-Qaeda and to create FEMA. One is considered in a 1984 from Orwell view, is you create some disorder in order to justify control. Okay? So in that way, Al-Qaeda and FEMA are just like flip sides of the same coin. Right?
Well, it's sort of what Karl Marx wrote about when he wrote about the dialectic. He took the idea from Hegel, but basically he was hired by the establishment, this so-called League of the Just, to write the Communist Manifesto, which laid out this theory. All right, we're going to take a break here for news. We'll be right back. Walter Brooks is my guest.
Taking back America one listener at a time. Chuck Morse speaks.
Walter Brooks is my guest. Walter, we're talking about manipulation of the public mind, of the public emotions, by what I would euphemistically call an establishment. I mean, I think it's been referred to as the Eastern Seaboard liberal establishment, and I think that's basically correct. And today, with President Obama in office, I think we're reaching a point of critical mass in the level of deception.
I don't know. I don't think that we're experiencing anything new. I think that the polarity of what is being shown has gotten very extreme. There's a lot of hate out there. I think part of what has occurred has been the control of the government upon the economy, where we used to have, say, a vibrant private sector. And so it didn't necessarily matter who was politically in charge. But that has somewhat changed, and it actually, I believe, changed under George Bush Jr., okay, where the government assumed a lot of ownership. And now when administration changes, a lot of the whole greater economy flips. And I believe that both sides have vested interests. And so they are simply using their money to promote their interests, okay? And so rather than getting a diverse economy and a diverse media with lots of different local points of view and things like that, the national picture has somewhat, with big feet, squashed everything else. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that certainly there are both sides, and the country has been very much centralized in power, going back, starting with Wilson and FDR with his declaration of emergency. And gradually that's continued onward and upward. It's not, regardless, it seems, of which party's in control. I think the Republicans are, and in a sense the evidence is what's going on now, is still very much a liberal party. It's very much in control of the establishment liberal wing.
I have a question for you.
What's that?
For you. It's something I haven't been able to fully understand. Okay? Why do you think the Republicans gave in on the government shutdown?
I think that they were as frightened as the rest of us by the propaganda that was spewing out of the left wing of the Democratic Party, which was that we would end up with this awful catastrophe. There would be a default. There would be, little Chicken Little, the sky is falling. And it was a game of chicken, I mean, the fact of the matter is that they didn't.
But, yeah.
I think that they didn't want to be, they blinked. I mean, it was like high noon at the OK Corral. Yeah, and also I think that people didn't trust, well, and also we didn't trust Barack Obama. I mean, Barack Obama, the fear was that he would be reckless enough to actually go forward and default on the government debt, which he didn't have to do. And the result could have been a declaration of emergency. It could have been, he signed a presidential directive toward the end of 2002. Not many people, 2012, not so many people know about this. But what it did was that it's declared that in a condition of emergency, however that's defined, and it's very vaguely defined, right, the executive could take control of the means of production. Now, so I think that there was a real game of chicken going on. I think that there was, I'm going to do it. I'm going to use this as an excuse to declare martial law. And I think we're getting close to that in this country.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thank you very much. And my guest is Walter Brooks. We're talking at this point, Walter, about the present crisis. which I see as a building one. I think it's a gathering crisis. I think that the Tea Party was courageously, and it's the only group that really is courageously standing up against it, and they're being demonized. There's an interesting article that was just published a couple of months back. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was by somebody who knows, who said that the Tea Party made enormous gains in the 2010 midterm election, but they lost steam in the 2012 election, and the reason why they lost steam was because individuals and small groups that were trying to organize this Tea Party were being harassed by the IRS. Now, there's been some testimony to back that up. On Capitol Hill, there's been a couple of minor such examples of where heads rolled, like, for example, with Lois Lerner. But yet, these people just got assigned better jobs somewhere else where they continue to collect their fat salaries paid by the taxpayer. There's been no prosecution. They've been allowed to plead the fifth. They've not. There's been no FBI investigation, and that the IRS has become a fearful agency of power. I think that the IRS is a reconstitution of the Black Hand. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
I would agree. It goes back to the difference in perception of the Attorney General. Okay? Some people think that the Attorney General is there to maintain individual rights and civil rights. But I believe his job is to be a defense lawyer for the executive branch. Okay?
Right. And it depends. I mean, it depends on the Attorney General. I mean, you've got ones like, for example, Janet Reno during the Clinton years. Her job was to defend her boss from all the scandals that swirled around that administration, and to make sure that anyone who tried to bring up anything that showed unpleasantness, that they would be denounced, they would be attacked. That was her job, and I think the same thing could be said of Eric Holder. On the other hand, there have been other attorneys generals who actually did their job and fought corruption. I think Robert Kennedy is an example of that. So it depends on who. Okay, we've got to take another break. We'll be right back.
Chuck Morse speaks.
Thank you very much. And Walter Brooks is my guest. Walter, we're getting into some interesting things here, I'd say. And I appreciate your insights.
More on the now.
Yes. And the present crisis, or as I see it, the crisis. We've got not only agencies. Yeah, please, go ahead.
I would agree with you that this coming election has its importance, that people should vote. All right?
Well,
people are apathetic.
They are, and the Tea Party is undergoing a Stalinist-style denouncement, and at the same time...
I agree that's to be expected. I mean, you stand up, people are going... Your opposition is going to say the worst, most unkind things about you, and most of those things might actually be untrue. It's just the way.
But it's worse than that. It's worse than that now, Walter, because what's happening is the kind of stuff that happened to you. What's happening is you've got the IRS going after people, and it could get worse. You've got agencies, you've got the NSA really now listening to every...
You say not that it really matters, but about 8 months ago, the IRS seized my bank account.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you're sitting there chuckling. I'm worried now. Not that I haven't much money they can seize, but this is really getting ugly.
I had made a property tax payment. I had needed a loan from a friend to be able to do so. And not only the shenanigans that went on. First of all, my bank informed me when I had tried to rent a movie out of a red box in the vending machine, was told that I couldn't. That is how I began to suspect there might be a problem. So I checked my balance, and I was something like minus $750. And I had no idea on earth how that could have occurred. So I called my bank to inquire, and I was told that they could not tell me anything about it. And I thought that was most unusual, too, because when my bank can't tell me why my account is now hundreds of dollars overdrawn, all right, so they gave me a phone number for their legal department, okay? And so I called it, and the IRS answered. Now, I did not know that Bank of America...
Well, you know, Walter, what's happened to you there is something that's, quite frankly, it's going to be happening to everybody, because the Obamacare now, if you don't pay your Obamacare tax, if you don't purchase the Obamacare mandate, which is going to cost the average family between $2,000 and $4,000 a year, and that's a lot of money. That's even before you get your six.
Bill. It is.
That's before you get. And by the way, that's before you get.
Whatever your electric bill is, okay? That's who you are.
Well, it's more than that, because then you're going to get a $4,000 to $6,000 deductible before you even get to use the crappy insurance. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't purchase
I earn then $70 a week on a good week, okay? I have food stamps. The phone that I am speaking to you on is food aid phone, okay? I am prohibited continually from 1988 from having a good above-ground job, okay? I had actually, these things continue, okay? I mean, I can laugh because I don't care anymore if I live or die. But if someone actually had something to lose and sought to stand up and say anything, and if whatever they said happened to differ from whatever the current agenda is, and if they were viewed as being significant in any way, they could face everything that I have gone through and continue to go through. And when I say continue to go through, I am telling you this is 20 years since I stopped doing world news. Okay?
You got on somebody's you-know-what list.
I am on the most loved list in America. Okay? I mean, it is a crying shame, and it is disgraceful in many ways. Okay? And as I said, I proceeded initially because I thought I did no wrong. I mean, I knew beyond a point that there were multiple government agencies involved. Now, maybe it's coordinated better. But the amount of money spent to suppress me, I mean, if they'd just given me a job, put me in a back room someplace and let me do analysis for them. You know what I mean? But no. No. And
right, no. They wanted to hound you. All right, Walter, we're going to be right back. Please stay tuned. Walter, what a powerful story you have. Please stay in touch with me. Scares the heck out of me, but I want to hear anything that's going on, because what's happening to you, as you say, is a microcosm of what can happen to any American that sticks their neck out. Walter, do you want my listeners to know anything about maybe books you've written that they might get, or websites or whatnot?
They can search for me online as Jualt, Jualt. It's like Juan, but Jualt. There are other things that I am seeking to do with my life, mostly spiritual, that I hope might be of interest to people. And if they search for me online under Jualt, they'll find all the relevant information.
All right, Walter. Listen, I Godspeed to you. It's a very powerful story, and I really want to thank you for joining me.
One last thing I want to say is I don't want my story to discourage people from standing up. I think one thing that is important is that I have endured and persevered, and it can be tough, but one person can make a difference. Okay?
Yep. No, exactly. I mean, if the more as people get up and go to bat, somebody gets knocked out, then the next batter comes up.
If you live like you're scared of secret police, you make their job easy. Go ahead and stand up for what you believe, all right? And if nothing else, take what you can as far as if there's adversity coming your way, because every bit of energy spent on you is energy that isn't spent someplace else.
That's right, and that's, I think there's growing numbers of us out here who are doing that. It's scary, especially after talking to you, Walter, but it must be done. Otherwise we're just, we're going to become spokes in a wheel. We have to use whatever freedom we have to try to alert people. And anyway, Walter Brooks, JUALT is the handle if you want to look up Walter's work. Walter, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
By the FDA, this product is not